Hello and welcome to Sew Like a Pro Quilters Edition. Somebody was asking me to do a video on piece quilting. So I found this sheet with all these different shapes, rectangles, linear lines, permission to photocopy. And I found it easier that if I drew all the lines on the back, I copied them exactly the same. I could kind of finger press it. You don't have to do that if you don't like, but sometimes you just can't see the lines on the front through the fabrics because they're so dark. So what I want to do is follow the order that's set up. Number one, I'm going to do one, and then number two. This is the only one that I need to stitch all the way around, is number one. So I set the stitch length at 3. I'm using regular quilting thread. So you would just choose a color, and I like to use the needle down position. So my first one, I started out with a color that I could see through. This is a great way to use up all your scraps. It's probably a good idea to press them all flat first. And you want to make sure you go right to the outside of the line. And I even go on the outside of the edge because that gives me a guide to trim later. So I would take my scissors, look, and this I would trim right along the edge of the paper. And really, you want to trim to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The other thing I do is I like to check the fabric and make sure it's going to fit all the squares. I want to figure out exactly what colors are going in what order. So I like to do almost kind of like that ombre effect, gratuity, you know, where you start at one color and you keep going in the same color family. So I want to take this one and line it up. I want to try and stitch right on top of the stitch or right next to the stitch so that I don't have to re-stitch it again. So here I'm going to stitch. I can feel the stitch. But I'm going to line my fabric up so my footer just lines straight up with that stitch. And I use the edge of the fabric as a guide to do the next roll of stitches. And I'm still at least going to go to the end of that paper. And I'm going to trim it away. Then I'm going to take this, look, and I'm going to finger press it. We don't want those little bubbles and creases, you know. So I can see this line just barely. So I wanted to check. I forgot to show you that. To fold it, line it up, and take it and fold it, and make sure that it's going to cover up your next number 2. I did number 1, I'm on number 2. That's going to cover up that line. So this one I'm going to take and flip it. I can barely see the line. If you can see it, you don't have to flip it. But you do want to make sure that you finger press it, needle down, and that you give it a little tug, make sure it stay nice and flat, and trim the threads as you go along. It's just less work, and it looks really nice. You don't want a big mess. So I'm going to trim my threads. See how that lays nice and flat? We want to trim these, trim all the threads. No need to backstitch. And trim it. So I have one partially done already. So the next step is to rip the paper off. So I kind of get my finger in there, and you want to tug it gently. Don't want to rip out your stitches. So I'm going to rip off the paper, all the pieces, and clean it up as much as possible. So I already had the batting pre-cut. I cleaned it up. You want to use your rotary cutter and go and square it and clean it all up. And then you want to do, figure out a fabric for the back. Figure out what seam allowance you want, because this is what we're going to do. Mine is like 3/4 of an inch bigger than my piece. And I'm going to take it and fold it and then stitch it and give me a finish. And I'll pick that out later, because I want to keep it big as possible. Now you can take these and stitch them all together and make a pillow. Stitch as many as these you want together. That's how many copies of these you'll need in order to make you a full-size quilt, or whatever size you want to use. So what I like to do now is I like to top stitch on the very edge of all of those creases that I have first. So I'm going to continue with the white. Most of the time I use a monofilament, so there you can see it'll just make really nice, beautiful top stitches. So I pin in my center, stitch down to my edge, and then I just continue that. Then you continue whatever kind of pattern you want. So I will go around the entire thing. I would do all my edge stitches first, because you might not want to stitch over the entire thing. So look, so you can get an idea of what it looked like with just the edge stitches. And it's really a good idea to stitch from the center out. For my next, and then I can always go trim those later. But I would just do my edge stitch from my center out, and then you can always go fill in the rest. So at that, I would do a stay stitch, whatever your width is that you decided. Half of that, I want to stay stitch at least half of that. And if you feel comfortable without doing that, what you can do is you can take it without doing a stay stitch. Let's do that. And I would go and press it. So I would take this and press it halfway up to my bag. Just half. I'm finger pressing this. And then I would take it and fold it up. And then press it again. So this is already stitched all the way around. And then all I have to do is stitch right along the very edge. Or roll hem. Make sure to leave that needle down, which I didn't do. And it moves. Look. And back stitch. I would do opposite sides first. I would do this side, flip it, do this side, and then I would do my other ends. So you can top stitch any kind of way you like, any color threads you like. Monofilament works best to look good with everything. So I hope that you would at least try a piece of paper piecing. And this is a great fun project for a kid to do, help them develop their eye or anybody else in it, and makes a really fun art piece. You can hang it on the wall, you can print words on top. Just have fun with it. May God bless all your quilting, knitting, sewing projects. And I'll see you next time. Sew like a pro.